Hello everybody. So I thought I'd do another video response to Alex J. O'Connor, aka the Cosmic Skeptic on YouTube, on this issue yet again of the freedom of will. So this young gentleman, this young chap, this young man seems to have been getting quite a lot of things wrong, I think, with this notion of the freedom of will. And he's going now into all sorts of other philosophers. He doesn't mention David Hume, even though he does mention David Hume, but he doesn't go deep into Hume's arguments so far as it relates to free will. He mentions a quote from Thomas Hobbes, and Thomas Hobbes is one of my favourite philosophers of all time. But the quote that he mentions is the famous one that's thought to be about the freedom of will. However, on a closer reading, I would have said that it's not really about the freedom of will so much as it's about freedom. It's about the freedom of action, or it's about freedom in a more general, broader sense. And Hobbes, of course, is the great political philosopher, and Leviathan is his great work of political philosophy. So I'll repeat the quote. The quote is, "Liberty or freedom signifies properly the absence of opposition. By opposition, I mean external impediments of motion." Then he goes on to say, "A free man is he that in those things which by his strength and wit he is able to do, he is not hindered to do what he has a will to." Now, merely because the terms will and freedom or free are involved in the same sentence does not necessarily mean that this is about the freedom of will so much, I wouldn't have said. And he goes on also, after having repeated that quote, to surmise, incorrectly I think, that free will is the ability to do what you want to do. Or he believes that that's what Hobbes believes. I don't think so. No, and he completely mischaracterizes this in the last video anyway, saying that the freedom of will is the ability to have acted otherwise. It's not that either. So again, what his videos are really lacking, I feel, is an adequate definition of terms at the beginning of the video. Define freedom first. If you wish to use the Hobbesian definition of freedom, by all means, I think it's a very good one. The absence of external oppositions, impediments of motion, Signify properly the absence of opposition. By opposition, I mean external impediments of motion. Yeah, anything that's impeding your movements. Or if we're talking about the freedom of will, we could talk on a more abstract level and more of a cognitive level, whatever would be a mental impediment in some way. So, for instance, if you had some sort of psychic blockage that prevented you from willing certain things. So, I don't know, one might be a morally decent human being and not will for a genocide, for example. I would have that impediment to the motion of my will, for example. So I grant you the will is not free in absolute terms, as I've said in the last video, possibly a little disingenuously. So, I do not desire the genocide of any group of human beings. My will is not free to that extent. It is, however, free to some extent. And he goes on to, the next thing he goes on to is Schopenhauer. And he talks about Schopenhauer claiming that because we don't determine our desires, we lack free will, since our desires are deterministic and so on. So we can't want to want. We can want to want, I think. For instance, I can will to a greater extent for me to give up smoking. However, it's unlikely to happen, since there's a conflict within me, a conflict over whether or not to keep smoking. For instance, I'm actually rather attracted to my own argument to keep smoking, which is the environmentalist case for it, that it reduces the human population. I'll die early and contribute less to global warming. As well as the fact that I'll contribute some greenhouse gas emissions via smoking, but then again it's tobacco, so it's carbon neutral, because tobacco plants trap carbon dioxide and so on. And I believe that the carbon footprint left by me would be significant, would be lesser if I were to live, say, 5 years less. And I do sort of believe that. And I'm holding a pipe, how Bertrand Russell-esque. Thinking about the freedom of will. Bertrand Russell, another compatibilist, by the way. Also my favourite philosopher. Yes, the Hobbes quote is not certainly not necessarily about free will. This, like, for instance, a free man, external impediments of motion. So if you're trapped in a prison cell, for instance, if you can't get out of the cell, or in prison in general, if you can't get out of prison, then your freedom is inhibited by an external impediment to your motion. In the bodily sense, not in this sort of cognitive level of the will. It's not connected to the will really at all. It's connected to one's literal freedom, one's corporeal freedom. However, if you're in prison, you nonetheless may have the will to escape. You may wish, want, or desire to escape, and this is me using the term will as a verb, since it may be used as a verb. You may decide, say you're in a cell, and you decide upon and initiate the action to get out of the cell by pushing against the door. You're free to do that. You are. You hence have free will. It may not happen, and I've given examples of this before in my last video. You know, one is perfectly at liberty to wish for a toilet made out of solid gold, and we can read, and I don't suggest that you do read The Secret at all, but we can read The Secret and perhaps start believing that, depending on the extent to which we will for certain outcomes, it'll affect somehow the likelihood of those outcomes occurring, which of course wouldn't, but we are nonetheless free to do so. And as I've stated already, yeah, we do have psychic or moral, possibly, impediments to wishing for certain outcomes. Just as I may wish for the genocide of a certain group of people. However, I cannot bring myself to do that, since morally, I feel it's poor behaviour to even so much as consider that. I think it's poor behaviour certainly to want it. I think it's, poor behaviour to think upon that sort of thing, or to desire it. So I can't do it. I can't make myself do it. But I'm free to want all sorts of things. I'm free to want £1 million. I'm free to want to give up smoking, frankly. And that is a desire in me, and we have conflicting desires also. It's not so cut and dry as and Alex's videos on freedom of will so far have gone back, and I think a lot of hard determinists do this quite often. They go back to, well, everything's cause, hence we lack freedom. That seems to be at the basis of the hard determinist perspective. It seems to be rather the nub of it, I think. And he gives a quote of the argument of a professional philosopher whose name I can't remember. But again, that focuses on everything, being sort of an unchallengeable fact, hence lack of freedom of will again. And I've written something also just now, and yeah, that's it. To advocate myself with the feeling of the freedom of will, I would have to dissociate with my own body. We do observe people in this condition. Therefore, yeah. The condition that you'd have to be in to truly lack the freedom of will is known as automatism. That's, in essence, when you're sleepwalking. I mean, or to an extent you lack mental capacity, to various extents. You're acting, but your will is dormant. it would be as though everyone is sleepwalking through the world if we lacked the freedom of will, wouldn't it? That you'd be acting unconsciously almost. And you know, I've been in situations, well, where I've seen people in situations where they do lack free will, it would seem, or they're being, or that their minds are being influenced to a great extent by cognitive constructs which would have arrived in their minds from external causes, rather than anything internal. And they do seem to lack, unfortunately, the mental capacity to make decisions for themselves. And it's rather different. There's a rather stark difference between that and ordinary functioning consciousness. So I suppose the burden of proof on me is, oh, hair. Well, I suppose the burden of proof is on me now to prove that the freedom of will exists, isn't it? So I think, yeah, I think what you need to do to prove freedom of will exists is to demonstrate a scenario in which the freedom of will doesn't exist. So, no, I've already done this in the last video anyway. Really, I think. It's more just a critique of young Alex's video. I could have done a better critique as well, I reckon. And actually gone into his arguments, but I can't be bothered to edit them, that's the problem. And do all the research properly, but well, no, I've already done the research, I've already formed my own opinion on this. I just can't be bothered to go read the stuff that he suggests and pick apart the argument of that other philosopher. But yeah, free will. So yeah, we don't. Yeah, that's the thing. My proof is in the dictionary. It's the freedom to wish for things. And it's not an absolute freedom, granted, but say I want to levitate this pen in my hand like a Jedi. I can really try and will for that. It's not going to happen, but I'm nonetheless free to will for it. But there likewise are things that I'm compelled to not will for, even though it wouldn't affect the outcome of it happening. I just, perhaps it's even the mildest fear that a genocide could occur if I were to will for one. And maybe, this whole, and it's an internal, hang up or superstition, possibly, that this argument from The Secret might hold some weight, perhaps, and if I were to will for it, it would happen. And maybe on that level, yeah, I'm a little bit superstitious, and that's the reason why I wouldn't will for a genocide. But yeah, anything that's nice, I would will for. Anything that's nice and makes people happy, other than genocide. Anything that's, good and just and decent and all that good, positive stuff. What else could I will for? I could will for a drawing in chalk to appear on my wall in the shape of a penis. In fact, I'm doing it right now, but it's not going to happen because that would be magic or supernatural, and the supernatural doesn't exist. Hence, it's supernatural or referred to as such. Do I really need to say much more on this? He totally got that quote wrong. It's not even about free will. It's about political freedom. What's meant by freedom in a political sense. I've read Leviathan. I know what's up with, even though I didn't understand half of it. You know, it's probably Alex Cherokon. Yeah. Um, do I have anything else I'd like to say? No, I think that's about it. And this video's gone on for long enough. Thank you everybody for watching. And Alex Cherokon, if you're watching, I'd love to debate you about all sorts of things, especially veganism. So thank you very much if you're watching. Bye.